3 Golden Guitar nominees. But next year, Angus, what do you think? You get the big one?
Fingers crossed.
Why not? You deserve it. There's a lot of great songs on this album, the Scrapbook. That's taken the charts by storm. It's done very, very well. Angus Gill is here.
How you doing?
Really, really well, mate. What have you been up to today?
Oh, just a lot of a lot of stuff. All no, I've been just trying to keep up with a few different projects I have on the go. Doing plenty of Zooms, doing plenty of interviews for this new album, and since we've had a bit of chart success over the last couple of weeks, I've had the interviews coming in thick and fast. So yeah, things happening left, right, and centre, which is good.
Yeah, really great. You're only a young fella. I don't know how old you are. You'll tell me.
23.
23. Oh, you're going
Time to get
really.
life insurance.
Well, it'll be cheaper and then more
Mm.
expensive at the end. Look, hey, don't worry about it. You've got better things to worry about. Bluegrass in Australia, it's got a pretty firm footing. I think. I think you hear bluegrass pretty often. But how would a young person like you, come across bluegrass?
Well, I came across bluegrass at quite a young age. I heard Paul Kelly's collaboration with the Melbourne bluegrass band Uncle Bill, and it was an album called Smoke. And that came out, I was probably about three when it came out in, I think it was early 2000, 2001 maybe. And I heard that album, it was actually they had a track, Our Sunshine, that was on the CMAA Winners compilation that my grandma owned. And I heard that song and I thought, oh, what's that sound? It was different to pretty much everything else on that album. I thought, oh, what's that? And then I realised that was a bluegrass sound. And then shortly after that, I heard a song on a Melinda Schneider album called "Can You Hear Me Down the Hillside,"
Mm.
and that had a real strong bluegrass flavour to it, and it really showed off her wonderful yodeling chops. And I was just kind of in awe with that song. And then kind of from there, I went back and discovered the father of bluegrass, Bill Monroe, and then kind of worked my way forwards. I've always been big on history, and I'm a bit of a history buff, and so I kind of got a firm understanding of bluegrass by going back and studying Bill Monroe, and then being familiar with people like Ricky Skaggs and the Dillards, Marty Stewart, and then there's a lot of people through the years. Obviously, Alison Krauss is reasonably, in the last 20 years or so, her and Union Station have become a fixture and a wonderful part of bluegrass. And people like Rhonda Vincent and Alan Jackson had a cracker bluegrass album out several years ago, and then so I really studied it, and I kind of had formed a pile of bluegrass tracks that I'd written with different people because the song was in the room and it just happened to be a bluegrass song, or it was heading in a bluegrass direction. And so I kind of was not, I didn't realise, but I was kind of secretly stockpiling bluegrass songs along the way. So that was pretty much how this album came about. I wrote with Jim Lauderdale. We worked over a couple of days on my last trip, and we wrote a song that he cut for a project of his, and then we wrote this Whittling Away track that I rediscovered last year in lockdown. And I emailed Jim and I said, oh, look, I'm really connecting with this song that we had written, and I'm thinking I might cut it. And I actually think, because it was a broken narrative song, I actually thought it might work as a duet. And I sent him an email, and he sent me his part like a week later, and then we pretty much had this standalone bluegrass track. And so it kind of accidentally formed. Like, I did have the aspiration to put out a real deal bluegrass album at some stage, but I think the universe was kind of telling me that's what's meant to happen.
Yeah, it was time. Just for
Mm.
people who maybe aren't that familiar with bluegrass, how are we going to define it? Is it the
I think
instruments? Is it a feeling? It's not
It's a
big.
combination of the two.
Mm,
Bluegrass often, and something that has often intrigued me about bluegrass is they take quite a melancholy or a poignant lyric and juxtapose that with quite a bright kind of lively sound, and it's usually obviously you can have slow bluegrass tracks and fast bluegrass tracks, and you can have songs in 3/4 time, but there's a strong emphasis on the offbeat, cha, 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 which the mandolin
mm.
does that, and that's kind of reinforced by all of the instruments in the band at certain times. The fiddle will kind of emphasize that offbeat, and so will the banjo and acoustic guitar will just be playing this steady rhythm. But in terms of instrumentation, bluegrass, there's no drums in traditional bluegrass. It's acoustic guitar, banjo, dobro, double bass, fiddle, all of very much acoustic sounding folk music, country music, and it's also the bluegrass harmonies also really have intrigued me, and I've spent a long time kind of studying them, and there's a lot of kind of tension and release in a bluegrass harmony where it almost reaches this dissonant point where it kind of clashes with the melody almost, and then there's that release, and it's like, there we are, and you don't hear that a lot in other kind of genres or subgenres of country music where it kind of feels like it's going to clash and it's rubbing up against the melody and then it kind of releases. So
Yeah, yeah, well done, well explained there. And close harmonies, generally
yeah.
2 to 3 harmonies, don't normally get the big high falsetto at the top. Doesn't have to be too thick, in that middle area of the
Yeah,
vocals. Yeah.
everything's quite close, and whether there's a lot of harmony or not, it's all
Mm.
quite close in the mix. It's not panned hard left and hard right. It's kind of just sitting in there with the vocal pretty intimately. And obviously, in a live music setting, a lot of bluegrass bands play around a single microphone, and they all kind of
Yeah.
crowd around the mic. And in a way, you're mixing yourself that way. Like if a guitarist has a solo or something, they've got to come up really close to the mic and play that solo, and then back off. And I love that whole idea. And I've had the opportunity to play several folk festivals, Woodford Folk Festival, and there's a great one festival here a couple of hours north of me, in Dorrigo Folk and Bluegrass, and they've got that kind of setup, when you play on that festival as well. So I really like playing around, like the idea of playing around a single microphone.
Yeah. Do you think you'll be able to tour that way, or at least a mini tour of doing that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, that's the plan. We've moved all of my tour dates for this album back to the end of February,
Mm.
and kind of from then on. So it's kind of a slightly tricky thing to do, playing around a single microphone, because you kind of have to. You have to work in there's different variables that come into play with something like
Mm.
that. You've got to have a nice sounding room, and obviously a good sound engineer that can ring
Yeah.
out all of the horrible frequencies if it's not a great sounding room. So it is a little bit fraught with danger, but we are going to try and have that set up, and if we don't, it will be for some shows, and then other shows will just be on
Yeah.
normal microphones.
As a sound engineer myself, I think I'd like to have a big sort of microphone for the vocals, and that would be my prop microphone, even though
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think I'd have a few little microphones around the mic
yeah,
stand to catch the instruments. I don't think
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it.
I'd feel so nervous having a one mic set up. But anyway, look,
Yeah,
that's me.
it's very tricky. You've really got to you have to know that setup and be so familiar with the room and familiar with the gear, and it is fraught with a bit of danger. But I've got one of those ear trumpet labs microphones, like one of those big ones that you're talking
Mm,
about, and it's a
yeah.
beautiful microphone. It looks gorgeous, but yeah, it's not the type of thing you can kind of bring out for every gig or
No.
every festival or whatever. So yeah.
Anyway, look, that's been Sound Chat with Dan and Angus.
Yeah.
What else? Moving away from music, you're at Warhope there. I've never been, but I'm sure it's lovely. What else do you do for a laugh around there? Just normal country lad sort of stuff?
Well, when I'm not, working on new music, I'm working on new music. I write all the time, not only for my own projects, but predominantly for other people's projects. So
Mm.
sometimes I'll always have a song kicking of my own that I'll write on my own. I'll usually write a song month or maybe two songs a month on my own, but then I have lots of Zooms, and when COVID conditions allow, people will come around here and write with me. um, and so that's been great. I've just been working with Diesel for his new album, and I've also got another project with Eric McCusker, who he's the lead guitarist and primary songwriter out of Mondo Rock, and so him and I are doing a joint EP project. So yeah, plenty of things on Zoom. I also produce albums and singles for other artists. So it's been a very creative time, even though there's been a lot of downers over the last two
Mm.
years. One of the positives has been just having a lot of time and space to do those creative projects, and it's kind of harder when you're on the road all the time to kind of keep up with doing that. So you do have to set chunks of time aside where you can get something finished when you're not out on the road, because it's a lot more consistent, and you can be in a kind of a regular routine at home, but it's harder to get that on the road. And so I have been enjoying, in a way, kind of having a somewhat normal life. But I also can't wait to get back out there and play some shows,
Yeah,
because it just
sure.
feels foreign. The idea of playing a show is like, that's unheard of.
I'm sure it'll all happen pretty soon and in a rush, and we'll forget all about this sort of stuff. But hopefully, we remember the big things. I wonder if you'll end up as one of those producers from the 70s. A lot of them went a bit mad and then moved out to the desert to a producing compound. Have you heard about those guys? And then
Yes,
they
yes,
they
yes.
sort of had breakfast and then they'd produce an album for a 70s band. I don't know, name one, any of them. And then they'd never leave. Do you think
Yeah,
you'll
yeah,
become one of
yeah.
those crazy guys?
Yeah,
That might
yeah,
suit you.
maybe. As long as I don't end up like Phil Spector or something.
No.
What a brilliant producer, but man, oh gosh, I think he died. The other, is he dead or?
I think we did lose Phil.
I think so. Yeah, no, his life was virtually very chaotic and not very good, not very great in areas.
But
So but what a gifted producer
well,
and great
producers,
songwriter
right?
too.
You're a producer yourself, but you can't live without them, particularly in music
Mm,
these days, right? Whether you're in rock, pop, or whatever sort of music you're in, you're not getting away without a good producer. I'm not going to say producers are king because, the content is king, but, is producing something that you're obviously going to continue to do more of, I think.
Yeah, look, I have had a lot more space and time to produce for other artists over this time. I've produced my last four albums, and actually co-produced this Bluegrass album with a friend of mine, Tim Crouch, who knows Bluegrass like the back of his hand.
Mm.
But yeah, I love producing artists. I get offers to produce all different artists. But if I hear someone and go, hey, I can really help them, I can really add something to what they do, they're the kind of people that I really want to work with. Because if there's people that I like what they're already doing, well, then I don't want to tamper with that. I
Mm.
think if what they're doing works and it's great. But if I hear an artist, and I often hear artists, some that I look up to, and others that are just kind of coming up, and I kind of go, look, it'd be really cool if I got to work with them as a producer, because I could really add something to what they're doing. Well, then they're the people that I usually try and seek out, or they're the offers that I'll usually take on, to produce. So yeah, I've been doing been doing plenty of that, and will continue to, because it's something that I got into kind of early on. I'd hear something and I'd go, oh, if I was producing that, I wouldn't have that instrument in there, and I would have done a better job producing the vocal, because
Mm.
oftentimes you'll hear a vocal either just butchered by auto tune, or it'll be sitting too low in the mix, and you can't
Yeah,
hear what the singer's singing.
it's my
And I
pet
go, well, if I
peeve.
was producing that, I'd have it a lot higher up in the mix, and I'd
Yeah.
take a lot more care at the comping and the tuning and that whole treatment of it. And so that's how I came into producing, and I did a lot of work experience, sitting in with other producers and seeing how they treated the artists when they come through the door, and what their workflow is, and what different plugins and bits of outboard gear they had, and was just sitting there kind of writing notes and taking it all in. And so it's very much something that you learn by doing, and you can do as many online courses and watch as many YouTube videos under the sun, but it's something that you're only going to learn, and you're only going to get better at by actually doing it.
Yes. Practical experience is worth a lifetime of looking at books. But you say about
Mm.
like with vocal being in the mix, that's a real pet peeve of mine because coming from producing in the 90s, we'd have it
Mm.
just above the music or maybe
Yeah,
even just below the music. I mean, you could just almost not hear it, and that was
yeah,
cool. Like that
yeah.
was where you wanted to be. But things really changed with melding of pop and rap, and now you've really got to have it up. And so many times I want to just flick off an artist, like an upcoming artist, an email that just says, you're nailing this, love your stuff, turn the lead vocal up 20%, and you're good to go.
Yeah, yeah, because
Because
it, it's so
people
it's
really want to hear lyrics these days.
particularly in what I do, and
Yeah,
what in country,
yeah,
and for most other genres too. You do need to hear. I know there are some, like when I did the album with Paul Kelly's band, which I put out last year. Mixing that was slightly different. There was, slightly different sound in the vocal, because that was all, what you hear, what you see is what you get. It was all tracked live at the same time, and there's no studio trickery, and it was all just really raw and
yeah.
real. And so the treatment for the vocal, because that was kind of a folk rock, kind of country rock, alt country project, and so I mixed the vocal obviously different in that project than I did in the Bluegrass, but it still has to be audible. You still have to be able to hear every word in there, because then it's just like oftentimes you'll hear things and you'll just go, I just can't hear anything. It's just all this wash of sound, noise.
Mm. Yeah,
So.
getting separation is tricky. More tech
Mm.
talk with Angus and Dan. I mean, we just don't
Yeah,
stop.
we don't stop, do we?
Um, what's going to happen next year? So we're going to get back out on the road, and I guess you're going to let this album sit for a bit. I guess you're not planning to, put anything out until you've really given this one a red hot go. I guess, mate.
Yeah, well, I do want to probably tour this album,
Hmm.
because the last two albums I haven't been able to tour very good because of old friend COVID.
Hmm.
But old mate, but no, I would like to. I probably will have another album out next year. I know I've got this EP with Eric that will be out next year, because I just can't help but put albums out, because that's what I do, And
Yeah.
when I've got a strong bunch of songs sitting around, and it's kind of, people are going, oh, have you got that song on a CD? And it's like, all right, well, and if I've got spare time and I've kind of in between projects, and just to keep myself sane, that's what I do. I've got I've always got something on the go. My mind is always thinking about the next thing. It's important to be thinking about the thing that you're doing currently, but I can't help but plan ahead, so yeah, I'm actually planning an album full of my own material that I've written
Hmm.
all on my own, and I'm actually going to play all the instruments and produce it all as
I was going to
well.
ask, how many instruments do you play?
Yeah, well, I play a lot of different things on, probably about 15 or so
Hmm.
instruments, maybe more, maybe less. I
It's in that
15
range.
probably sounds about right. Yeah, but I do all sorts of things. Obviously, guitars, banjo, mandolin, Hammond organ, Wurlitzer piano, bass guitar. You know, different percussion things, different types of keyboard instruments, a lot
Mm.
of stringed instruments, bazookies and dobros and things like that. So I don't play any woodwind instruments, but practically anything that I need to be able to fill out a track and you know some color instruments too there just to kind of put a bit of a sparkle on but it's all about serving the song and all about serving the lyric for me and everything's just there to build that texture up and just have everything feeling good, you know.
Fantastic. Now, you're not the sort of country artist that we're going to see sporting a big hat.
Hat. No,
No,
no, I'm not a hat
that's not your
act.
go. But if you did have to keep the sun off your body, what would you go with? Like fans want to know.
Oh gosh. Oh, I don't
Yeah,
know.
would
I
you
don't.
go a cap? Would you go like a terry toweling thing like me? Or would you go with
Yeah,
a
well,
sombrero?
Um, yeah, I probably a cap, but then that's a bit, you know, there's a lot of American country singers with a
Yeah,
ball cap on, and I kind
yeah,
of go,
trucker's cap.
I just feel a bit uncomfortable wearing a ball cap backwards. Like I just feel like a
Hmm.
rebellious school student, you know,
Well, then one
and
day you might be doing outdoor. You might, you will become older. You'll be more sun aware. You can't just drape a
yeah,
towel over your head when you're doing an outdoor festival. What do
well,
you?
maybe, you know, but
Oh, I
I
know. Hard hat. You never
a
see a
hard hat,
cat.
yeah, yeah. No, I just tend to look shit in hats, so I just don't wear them. You know, well, I do. I'll wear a cap, but you know, I just don't. It just doesn't suit me wearing a hat, and yeah,
I've
I've
got a
just
lovely round head, and it really suits a hat. You know,
that's good. That's
it's
good.
globular. It's globular. It's round like an orange, and a hat just
If I ever
really suits
start
me.
balding, if I ever start balding, I might consider it. But if I ever start balding, I'll get a hair transplant or something.
Yeah.
So you know, I don't think I'm just going to be one of those older entertainers that you see that look like one of those Lego men that have just got that severely dyed, you know, black hair.
But as I always say when this
Like one
comes
of the
up,
presenters on
that's
NBN News,
as I
you know.
always say when this comes up, that's what you want out of an older entertainer. You want them
Exactly.
to have dyed hair.
You
You want
want
them
them
to be
to
like a,
look, you know,
orange.
25 again. Yeah.
Because
All the Botox and fillers, you know, yeah, you
absolutely,
want them.
because that's the fun thing. Well, look, a hair transplant. If it's good enough for John Williamson, I reckon it'll be good enough for you. Because I don't know for sure that he's had one, but it looks a lot like it.
I don't
Well, look,
know. No,
we've got.
I know Shane Warne's had them, so you know, if
Well,
it's
he's
good
a
enough
good
for
bowler,
Warney.
but I don't know whether we'd use him as a example for anything else. But for
No,
bowling,
no.
yes.
Yeah, good
We'll
spin
say
bowler.
goodbye to Angus Gill. We'll just congratulate him again on this fantastic album that I've been enjoying, and everyone else has been enjoying, even around the world, I bet. Um, and wish him all the best, and we'll catch up. Look, we might try and catch up with you next year from the road or something
That'd be
like that.
good. That'd
So
be
many
great.
young artists I'm talking to, they're just champing at the bit to get out on the road, and I really want to hear all the stories of being back out there and just what it's like. Because I'm too old to go myself, but I'm not too old to sit behind a computer and ask questions.
No, and we're glad you do. Yeah, it was good fun chatting to you, Dan. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Angus.